Hi, my name is Addie.
My name is Hannah, and we're the host of the podcast, His Will, Your Life.
Our podcast aims to share a Christian perspective about issues facing our world today.
Today's episode will be discussing the situation in Afghanistan.
So Hannah and I decided the best way to go through this video was to give you the history of Afghanistan and what's currently occurring in Afghanistan, just to get you the bigger picture and make it so it's easier to understand what is currently occurring and why it is happening. So I'll be doing the history part, and Hannah will be doing the current and possibly what's going to happen in the future part. And my information was taken from the Daily News article, Afghanistan's Long History of War and Strife. We will have it in the bio if you want to go take a look at that. But if not, you can always look it up by that name as well. So all of this started in December 25th, 1979, Christmas Day of 1979. And that was when the Soviet Red Army entered Afghanistan to support the country's communist government against Afghan Islamic holy warriors. And they stayed there for 10 years, until February 15th, 1989. The last Soviet soldier left at that time, and it ended 10 years of occupation. In September of 1996, following fighting among Afghan groups, the Taliban captured Kabul after sweeping across the country without hardly a fight. In September of 2001, the U.S. Congress authorized the Bush administration to attack the perpetrators of the attacks, such as 9/11. And on October 7, 2001, a U.S.-led coalition launched an invasion of Afghanistan after Mullah Omar refused to hand over bin Laden. November 13, 2001, the Taliban fled Kabul as the coalition entered with Afghanistan's Northern Alliance. And then we go to the present, and that's April 14th, 2021. President Biden said the remaining 2,500 to 3,500 U.S. troops in Afghanistan would be withdrawn by September 11th to end America's forever war. And on August 31st, 2021, it was the last day people could safely leave Kabul, specifically Americans. The last time Afghanistan was a country free from any terrorists or any communist rulers was in 1953.
Yeah, I feel like we hear a lot about Afghanistan when they're having problems. And I feel like a lot of people here don't realize just how long they've been dealing with stuff like this. How long it's been since they were free.
Yeah, it's a long time. And, there was about 10 years recently, just until this year, where it was kind of in the same state the Philippines were after World War II, where we kind of just led them to start getting to be independent. And I think actually we were just going to let them be independent, and then the Taliban took over, which is just incredibly disappointing that there wasn't even, a fight for them to get their freedom that they'd worked so hard to get earned.
Yeah, they finally got a couple steps forward and just got pushed right back, basically. And it's heartbreaking to hear about.
Everything that's happening.
Yeah. So I'm going to go over some current events. My information is from BBC News. As Addie said, these links will be in the description as well. So U.S.-led operations to evacuate people by air have ended. As she said, August 31st was the last day people could safely leave. The last flight took off from the Kabul airport just after midnight on Tuesday. This deadline was agreed with the Taliban for all foreign forces to withdraw. More than 123,000 civilians were evacuated by U.S. forces and the coalition partners after the Taliban took control of the capital on August 14th. It's unclear how many of those 123,000 civilians were Afghan nationals. The U.S. said that it flew nearly 80,000 civilians out of Kabul, and of those 80,000, about 5,500 were Americans, and more than 73,500 were either Afghans or other foreign nationals. The latest movement of Afghans is part of a historical exodus from a country that has suffered instability and conflict for many years, as Addie went over. And this exodus is of biblical proportions. Even before the Taliban retook control, more than 550,000 people had been forced to flee their homes this year due to fighting. All of this means that an estimated 3.5 million Afghans are still internally displaced within the country, in addition to all of the ones that did get out. On Sunday, the U.S. launched a drone strike that caused civilian casualties. A majority of these casualties were children 18 and under. The Pentagon's top general defended this strike, saying that it was a necessary action. The Islamic State has, however, claimed responsibility for the suicide bombing, resulting in the deaths of 13 U.S. service members and over 170 fleeing citizens. Over 100 countries have pledged to accept Afghan nationals into their borders, including the U.S., Canada, and Britain. But other countries have created new barriers to keep these refugees from entering their borders. I'm now going to tell you about some charities and statements that are working to help this situation. Operation Lightshine has a mission to combat child exploitation and human trafficking, to shine a light into the darkness. They organized operations to rescue Americans, allies, and Christians trapped by the Taliban and ISIS. Their entire premise and statement when they started this was they were saying that Biden was leaving Americans behind, and they were going to make sure that couldn't happen. They were basically doing what Biden's administration should have. The Nazarene Fund is another charity. They work to rescue, rebuild, and restore. They're accepting donations at the moment. They have actively sent out a fleet of planes to Kabul and back and have saved hundreds of lives, and they're not stopping there. President Trump released a statement expressing his grief and condolences to the service members whose lives were lost and to their families. In his words, "This tragedy should have never been allowed to happen, which makes our grief even deeper and more difficult to understand." And while Trump was expressing his grief and condolences, Biden repeatedly walked away from reporters' questions. A Pew poll found that only 27% of 100,000 Americans think the Biden administration has handled the Afghanistan situation well. Only 43% of those were Democrats. Many restaurants and businesses have honored the 13 lives that were lost in the Kabul airport. Texas Roadhouse was one of many to honor. They did so by reserving a table in many of their locations with 13 glasses of beer and an American flag displayed on the table.
I just think personally this whole situation is just very sad and disappointing and very reflective of America right now. And I think it's just absolutely shameful what Biden did this time, you know? I'm not saying I was a strong supporter of him, but I did like what he did with the Paris Climate Agreement. I thought that was a very good thing, and I actually had a little bit of hope, you know, until this past month with everything he's been doing. But this is just, I think, so far one of the biggest letdowns of his presidency. You know, there have been presidents before him over 10 years that have fought for these people's freedom and lives, and all of that was just sent down the drain in 3 months. Not even 3 months. Years of fighting was just ended for no reason. You know, like, we're the biggest nation in the world. We should be able to beat this.
Exactly. He could have done so much more. This situation, it's heartbreaking that it occurred, but it also could have been handled so much differently and so much better. I'm sure people have seen the news. He's leaving Americans, service dogs over there, and he doesn't seem to care.
Yeah, I mean, it's just horrible. Why didn't you put up a fight? That's my question. If President Biden ever saw this video, which I highly doubt he ever will, but that would be my question to you. Why didn't you fight for us? Why didn't you fight to show America that we are as good as we seem, you know, that we do have the courage to fight like we should? Because this is really an act of cowardice, you know? We should have fought for those people's lives, for our own lives. There have been people that have come back maimed and killed, you know, from this war that's been going on. And it was all just given up to go back to the way things were. Why?
And at the very least, he could have acted like it had an impact. And those 13 lives that were lost, I'm sure at least some people have seen the reports of how terribly he treated the families of these. They're never going to see their kids again. And he tried to make it about him and his children. And it just, I get it. You're the president and people look to you as an example. Right now, it's not about you. It's about the lives that were lost because of you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. I watch a news source called Inside Edition, And there was this whole video about how during the funeral of these 13 soldiers, he just took the time to look at his watch while they were going by. How rude and ignorant do you have to be to look at your watch and not even take 10 minutes for people that are in coffins that fought for this country to get off the plane? You couldn't have waited 5 more minutes, Biden? 5 more minutes. Not even. And one of the sisters of one of those soldiers was there, and if you listen closely to the video, she screamed, "How ignorant of you," because she was so upset at him, and rightly so. She had a right to be so upset about this. And I know we're focusing a lot on these 13 soldiers, but I feel it shows a lot of what happened.
Yes, it's a small amount compared to the amount of people affected by this, but it shows what's happening respectively, in my opinion at least.
It just shows how everything went down the drain so quickly and how shameful that is.
Absolutely.
And I'll start bringing in the biblical perspective of this, but Joshua marched around, the area, I forget what it's called right now. Hannah, help me.
Jericho?
Jericho. Yes, Jericho. He marched around Jericho with those trumpets and everything for 7 days in grueling heat, and he didn't give up at the end of the day, and it didn't easily go back to the way it was. If they could do it back then when they didn't even have the things we have to use, that's pretty shameful on us. Yeah. That we can do something.
Definitely. Just exactly what you said. I couldn't have said it.
Yeah, so I have a couple verses to share, particularly about who should be in control and who shouldn't. Yeah, so I'll share mine and then we can kind of go over them and everything. So the first one I found was from Psalm 22:28, and it states, "For the kingdom is the Lord's, and he rules over the nations." Second one I found was Colossians 1:17, which states, "He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." And the last one, which is particularly good, is Ecclesiastes 8:8, which states, "No man has authority to restrain the wind with the wind, or authority over the day of death. And there is no discharge in the time of war, and evil will not deliver those who practice it."
Definitely a good one, speaking to what's going on right now. He's definitely in charge. He's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. If anybody, the president's not a king, but let's just assume for a second that America had a king. He's still not in charge in the big picture. He has no control, and he shouldn't act like he does. No ruler should act like they have complete authority.
Absolutely not, because at the end of the day, they don't. The Lord has all the authority. At the end of the day, God has his hands over those people. And we just have to pray that hand protects them from every evil that's going against them, because there is still a battle going on, whether people want to acknowledge that or not. And there's, I think, always going to be a battle until they're a free country.
And even after that, there's the people that remember everything they've been through are going to have to battle with that every day.
Absolutely.
And the authority does not mean don't listen to earthly authorities. You still have to. They're still in charge, just not in control. They don't get to decide who dies and who comes home.
Yeah, at the end of the day, earthly figures aren't God. They can't decide who lives. They can't decide who dies. And these Afghanis, I feel particularly bad for them, because a friend of mine who watches our podcast, his name is John. So I'm going to use your bit of a reference here, John, if you're watching this. But you made a very good point to me in that they're Muslims. They don't want to fight. They believe in peace. And that can be a very challenging thing, especially being in the Middle East. Israel constantly gets attacks from the 3 countries around it. And if Afghanistan ever becomes a free country, they're probably still going to get attacked from the Taliban and everything. And they're going to have to fight, whether they want to or not, just to defend living. I think going to be a big issue.
Yeah, basically what you said. They're always going to be a target because people are going to think that they're an easy one because they're not going to fight back.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one time where I'll say, prove them wrong. Prove them wrong. Fight back just once. It's, you know, I know it seems like a horrible thing, and it is a horrible thing. War is a horrible thing, but it's also for the greater good at the end of the day. And that's what I hope we can convey in this episode, is that this war is for the greater good of Afghanistan. And both Hannah and I, we stand with Afghanistan. We want the best for you, and we want you to be free.
Yes, our prayers definitely go out to everyone dealing with this, be it in Afghanistan or those who have gotten out. Because, you know, there have to be families that have gotten separated and have no idea where each other are. And that's heartbreaking to think about. But to get the full picture, you have to realize just how bad it is. And definitely just continue to pray for these people, because that's kind of all we can do at this point. Especially as teenagers.
Absolutely. Pray for Afghanistan and for anybody who is going to help them. And let us know what you think. You know, put it in the comments, your opinion, everything. We want to hear this. It's a very big world issue right now. And I think we could also use a little bit of positivity with all that's happening with that.
Definitely.
I think that about wraps everything up.
Yes. Thank you very much for joining us today as we discuss the current situation in Afghanistan.
And keep tuned, because next week we will be discussing abortion.
We send our thoughts and prayers out to all of you, and remember to like and subscribe.
And we will see you next time on His Will, Your Life.